Great. So we're going to write a user-defined function that is going to take a two-dimensional array, and that array is going to be n rows and n columns. So we have a square array essentially. It can be a 5 by 5 or a 4 by 4 or a 10 by 10 or whatever it's going to be. And we are going to chop it up with kind of a diagonal slash where we'll get rid of the bottom half of that square and we're left with just the upper half. If you have a look at this example here, we've got 5 elements on the top. So then that means we've got 5 rows going down. In the output, we'll have 5 outputs, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. So that's what we want to replicate. And that's quite important, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, because that allows us to figure out where we want to go and what we want to do with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work through a solution for this. If you have questions, shout them out. But I'm not going to take up any time getting you guys to actually come up with a solution. If there are other worksheet questions there, we can come back and have a look at that another time. So I've created some skeleton code here. I've created my main method. I've created my upper half method, which will be the kind of the chop part. And then what I've done here is I've created a variable here or a method here called create array. And that's just going to allow us to populate the array with random values, because otherwise I would have to have either hard coding or something in there to put values in. I don't really want to do that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, I'm going to create a new array here, call that b is equal to a new integer array. And remember, this is 2 dimensions. We need to have our 2 empty square brackets. And the size of this array is going to be whatever value is passed in. So if we pass in x there, well then we're creating an x by x array, whatever value x might be. And then here, what we're going to do is we're going to say, create a for loop, basically to cycle through all of our values. So here we're going to have I is less than b dot length. So remember, when you have a 2-dimensional array and you call b dot length or array dot length, it's only going to tell it's going to cycle downward through each of the rows. That's our first one there. And then we're going to have another loop inside that using a different counter variable. So while j is less than, here it would be b in row I. And that's a good habit to go with. Even though we know we've got a square array and it's going to be kind of nice and uniform in shape, it's a good habit to have this name of the array and the row you're specifically talking about, because as we saw in the last couple of slides of our notes from last week, there are scenarios where you can create a 2-dimensional array where the rows have different amounts of columns in them, a jagged array as such. So we're going to make sure that even if we were given some sort of a jagged array, we can still deal with that by referring to the specific row we're on. So the first row, the second row, the third row. And then that's going to be j++. Okay, and then inside that, I'm just going to say that bij is going to be equal to or dot next int. Let's say 10. And actually, just let's leave it at 10. Usually I'll do 10 plus 1, so the range will go from 1 to 10. But if you have a look here at the output, in the example, I'm only using single digits, and that's fine. But also we saw last week from trying to print out a 2-dimensional array that if we have if we have an array that has single digits or double digits and triple digits, it can mess up the sizing. So I'm going to keep everything as single digits. So this random here will go from 0 to 9 for us. And that'll just fill up the array with that. And the last thing I want to do here is I want to say return b. And that'll just send back my array. So now that I've got that written, I need to go back up to my main method where I'm going to create a scanner. And a value here called size, 0. I'm going to prompt the user system. Enter a size for the array. Okay, so we're going to ask the user to enter a size in. We're going to say size is going to be equal to kb.nextInt. Take in that value there, and then we're going to call, I'm going to say, sorry, int square bracket a is equal to create array size. So what's going to happen now with the code that I have here, we're going to prompt the user for a size or for a value. They're going to enter in the value. We're going to call this array here, sending in that value, which will come and run create array, which will randomly populate that array with whatever size it is and return it back. So when this line of code here is finished, A is a fully populated array. While I'm thinking of it, I probably should have a print method here. So public static void print. I'm going to send in, what have I done? There. Okay, so we're just going to use this to print out our array. This is going to be print there, and then I'll also need a new line at the end. So this is, again, going back over what we talked about last week of how to print out an array and make it look like a grid. So now we can call print and pass in that array, and it'll print out the values for us in a grid so we can see is it working or not. So here we can say after it's been created, we can say print, and we send A in, and it will print that out to the screen with us. Okay, nothing I've done there has got anything to do with the question I was asked to do. That's just all set up so that we can actually see that it's working. So what I need to do now is when I pass in this array here, I need to do a couple of things. So I'm going to get the array in. It's going to be already populated with values. It'll be a specific size. So it'll be n columns and n rows in size. So the first thing I need to do is I need to figure out what n is. How large is that array? If we go back and have a look at the question, which should go up the top here, it's going to have n rows and n columns. So I only need to get the length of the first row, or the number of rows. So I just need to go array.length, and that will tell me what that size is, which is going to go back and it's going to correlate to how many values do I want to print on the first line. And then when I move on to the next line, I'm going to print one less, and move on to the next line, I'm going to print one less, and move on to the next line, I'm going to print one less, and so on. Okay, so there are a couple of ways I can do this. What I'm going to say here is I'm going to say int, let's call this length, is equal to a.length. So that'll give me the size, which will give me 5 if I did a 5 by 5 array. I'm going to use that calculation to work out how many values from the array I'm going to print out and how many times I'm just going to print a skip. If we're to look at our array, and again, it's good to have an example here because it allows you to figure out where we are. This is row 0. And we print 0 spaces here. We print all the values from the array. This is row 1, and we print 1 space, and then the remaining values from the array. This is row 2, we print 2 spaces, and the remaining values. Row 3, 3 spaces, remaining values. Row 4, 4 spaces, and the last value. And that's the way I'm going to treat this, okay? That because we know we start counting from 0 in our array, I'm going to have a variable that will tell me how many times I need to print a space here, and then it'll show me where I'm going to go and print out from. Beyond that, if I know that my value is going to be, excuse me, is going to be here, 0 is where I start printing. So this is column 0, I start printing here, column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. The diagonal element allows a lot of flexibility there. So there are a couple of ways I can do this. I can have one loop, which will go down through each of the rows. And inside that, I'm going to have 2 loops. I'm going to have one loop that is going to, oh, they're all there. Has everybody completed his hand up the forms? There. Client side CWD. I could have a loop that will say, first row, okay, I'm going to print 0 spaces, and I'm going to print 5 values there starting at index 0. And then the next row, I'm going to print 1 space. I'm going to print all the values here starting at row 1. Here, I'm going to print 2 spaces and start at column 2 and print across. Here, I print 3 spaces. So I could do that. Okay, that's one way of doing it as well. Another way, because that is a loop, that is lots of loops, and we should avoid lots of loops where possible. Another way of looking at it is that I could have a string, an empty string, that after each row, when I come down, I add a single space to that string. So it starts at 0, then we add 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4 space as we work our way down. If I'm doing that, I need to work out what I'm going to, where I'm going to start printing from. But again, as I highlighted, row 0, we start from column 0. Row 1, we start from column 1. Row 2, we start from column 2, and so on. The last way I could approach it, that I can think of immediately, is that I have a counter that starts at 0 and increments as I go down each row. And it will basically say, while I'm below this counter number, I print a space. When I'm at this counter number or above, I print the actual value in the array. So if it gets the first index in the array and goes, my counter, am I above or below it? Am I below it? I'll just print a space and move on to the next space in the array or next position in the array. If I'm above that counter, well, then I'm going to actually print the value inside the counter. So as I've highlighted a couple of times, there are multiple ways of solving these problems. Okay, every problem I give you, there are multiple ways of solving it. There are 3 that I can think of immediately. There are other ways of doing it, but there are 3 that I can think of immediately. I'm going to have a look at the last one, where I'm going to have a loop to go down through the rows, a loop to go across through the columns, and I'm going to have an extra variable and an if statement to decide at any one position in my array, so at any one of these indexes in my array, am I going to print a space or am I going to print the actual value in the array? Does that make sense? Because there's nothing, just because we have an array and just because we have values inside it, there's nothing requiring us to print those values. I could print out a grid of 5 by 5 spaces. It would look weird, but I could do that. And you could create a Sudoku problem where you have the completed Sudoku grid, but you choose to selectively print out what values are. And if you have the grid already filled in the data in the program behind it, you could utilize that as when someone enters in a number, you could check is that the correct value or not. You give it scores based on that. Okay, so let's go back in here. Let's have a look. So I know the length here, that'll help me there. This is going to be my counter, actually. This is going to be, let's call it something more sensible. So not length, let's call it space counter. Okay, I'm going to count the number of spaces I print on a line. And I'm actually going to set that equal to 0 to begin with. Okay, I'm just going to copy and paste this for a moment. Oh, actually, sorry. This one makes a lot more sense here. Okay, so there's my printing loop here. Go down through each of the rows, go across through each of the columns, print out my values, move on to the next line. So far, it'll just print me out a full array, 5 by 5 or whatever we have in there. So let's have a look and see what else I'm going to do. Here, I'm going to say, I'm going to have an if statement. I'm going to say if j is less than space counter. Well, then what I want to do is I want to print out two spaces. One for the actual space in between the letters and one for the value I'm not going to print out. So if j is less than space counter, it's going to do this. Otherwise, if j is equal to or above the space counter, I'm going to actually print out the value. So what should happen here is on any one line, so in any one row that I'm in, it's going to say, all right, the value of j, which starts at 0 and works its way across, is that less than space counter, or is it equal to or above space counter? So if we take the very first line, space counter is equal to 0 to begin with. Is 0 less than 0? No, it's not. Okay, well then I'm not going to do this. So for the entirety of the first line, I'm going to print out the numbers. What I need to do now is here. I need to go space counter plus plus. So we get the first line printed out. The counter is equal to space counter to begin with. We print out all the numbers. We come down, we go space counter plus plus, and we go system.out.print. So it moves it down one line. We go back up to the inner loop. J starts at 0. Is 0 less than 1? Yes, it is. Okay, we print one space. Ignores the else statement, goes back up. J goes up by 1. Is 1 less than 1? No, it's not. Print out that specific value. And print it out, print it out, print it out, print it out. Space counter goes up by 1. Back up again. J gets started by 0. Is 0 less than 2? Yes, print a space. Move on to the next one. Is 1 less than 2? Yes, it is. Print out a space. Is 2 less than 2? No. So for the rest of that line, we're going to print out the numbers that are actually held inside the array. And we go back up again, and so space counter goes up to 3. So you can see what's happening is each time we're doing this check, it's this one extra additional check of, I know how many spaces I need to have because I'm keeping track of it here. And if I haven't reached the required amount of spaces, I'm going to print it out. And when I have reached the required amount of spaces, I'm going to flip back to printing out the actual number that we have. Does that make sense? Okay, I haven't compiled this program, so let's actually see if it works. It should work, but let's find out. I say that on desktop, it's fine. And properties. Okay, yeah, is that visible for everybody? Yep. Let's go with 50 just to be sure. Right, now it should be visible. Java C, diagonal. Lots of errors. What have we got a problem with here? Can't find symbol B. Why can't I find symbol B? Because I have called the array A, like an Egypt. Let's call it B. Let's try that again. 1. Line of 3. Line 43, line 42, line 41. And again, okay. Now I've compiled it with no errors. So let's have Java diagonal. So what's going to happen now? It's going to ask the size for the array. So let's go with 4. Well, let's go with 5 because that'll make more sense with diagonal. So it prints out the whole array first. The reason why it doesn't print out the slide, the diagonal part of it is I've never called that method. So let's go upper half here and send in our array A. And actually what we'll also need here is we will need a gap in between it. That'll do there. And what I will also do is I will say, so I'm just going to have a gap here. That should, no, never mind, that won't work. So 5 array. You can see what we've done here is we have our 5 by 5 array here. And here we have our diagonally slashed one where we've got 5 elements to begin with, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. And it's really the trick of how many spaces am I printing at the front. If I were to change that value and print a larger one, it does basically the same thing. Okay? Does that make sense? So it is very possible that you would get some variation on that question in, let's say, the class test or in the exam in May. I might not ask this one. I might ask, what if you wanted to print the lower half of that? So you wouldn't be printing this part here, but you print the bottom half. I'm not going to try to do that, but it's a minor adaptation to that piece of code. Fair enough? Anybody have any questions on that program? I suppose that's the key part there. No? Okay. When we get past submitting the assignment, we will come back and we will have a look at two-dimensional writing. I have a feeling with the deadline looming that the assignment might be taking focus in your head
minutes of phone. So
we'll come back to it. There, it's recorded for posterity, so you can go back and you can have a look at it, and then we'll come back and start revisiting questions as we get past that assignment. Fair enough? Okay. If there are no questions, what we'll do is we will just switch out into working on the assignment. Let's end that there and end.